Hi, I'm Scott Mansell and welcome to Driver 61's University Series. In today's tutorial we're going to take a look at how to drive at the limit. Now, to be a truly fast driver we need to be driving at the limit consistently whenever we're on the circuit. And in today's tutorial we're going to look at what exactly is the limit, why we need to drive at it, and how we can drive at the limit so we know that we're driving as quickly as possible. So what do I mean when I'm talking about driving at the limit? Well, driving at the limit is having the car travelling through the braking, entry, mid and exit phases of a corner as quickly as possible and using 100% of the tyres grip available at all points through the corner. If you're not doing this and maximising the speed and grip that you're carrying through a corner, then you'll be losing lap time. Now, it's important to know that the limit is variable. A driver who is nice and smooth will have a higher grip threshold, a higher point at which the car begins to break away than a driver who has spiky inputs. Now, this is because when you have sharp inputs, you transfer more of the car's weight, and this brings the ultimate grip level down. And we've spoken about this in the previous weight transfer tutorial. Now, as we go through this tutorial, I'm going to talk a little bit about mistakes and how we manage mistakes. Now, for me, a mistake isn't just if you brake 10 meters too late and go sailing past the apex. A mistake is actually when you don't carry the precise and exact and most amount of speed that you can through a corner. So it may be that you brake 1 meter too early. Now, although we can't see that this is a mistake when we're watching on track, actually you're giving up a little bit of lap time. And to me, and when we're talking in these tutorials, this is a mistake. So why do we want to be driving the car at the limit? Well, this is very simple. If you're not driving the car at the limit all the way around the race circuit, then we're leaving lap time on the table and we'll be losing time to a driver who is maximising every phase through the corner. Now, what's interesting in this section is to understand how a driver develops as his skills progress with more experience on the circuit. So if you take a look at this diagram to my right, we're looking at 4 different drivers with various levels of experience, from a beginner track day driver to a race driver or a experienced track day driver who may have a couple of years or 3 years experience. Now, this diagram shows the amount of traction used from 0, for example, to 100% against the amount of slip angle, or rather the amount of sliding, the amount that the car slides. Now, you can see at point A, this is a new driver. He's not using 100% of the grip available, and so a new driver will be driving around maybe at 80% of the ultimate grip level at the ultimate limit, and so he's very safe. The car never slides. Now, driver B might have, I don't know, a year's experience, and he's getting there, he's building speed, he's building confidence, and he may have the car sliding here and there. The slides might take him by surprise, and when he reacts to the slide, it's exactly that, it's reactive. He's not expecting the slide to happen. We then jump across to driver C all the way over here. Now, driver C has actually gone beyond the optimum amount of sliding, and he has lots of confidence. He has the car moving around, he's quite comfortable with this, but actually the inputs are a little bit harsh, the slides are a little bit too much. And as you can see by the curve here, when the car is sliding a lot here, we're not actually using all of the traction available. As you slide more, you get to a point where the car slides too much and actually the amount of grip reduces. So this driver is very confident and happy having the car sliding around, but in fact is overdriving the car. Then we hop back to driver D, who has much more experience, and yes, he's comfortable having the car sliding around, but actually he's toned his driving down a little bit. He's become much more refined, and he'll have the car sliding just tiny little bits as he enters and goes to the mid corner and exit of the corner, and this is what's fast. Now, there's a few stages as you're learning to drive the car more and more refined at the limit. The first stage, which is driver A, is when you're building your confidence. You're learning the circuit lines, you're learning the basic technique, good vision, and so on. At this point, it's important that you actually don't have the car sliding around, because you need to use your mental capacity to think about other things. The second phase is as you're approaching the limit, the kind of the lower limit of grip. Every now and then you'll have the car sliding around. It might take you by surprise, but when the car's sliding, at least you know that you're approaching that limit. Now, the third phase is as you're becoming more and more confident having the car sliding around, you're doing it more often and you're doing it more consistently through each corner. Now, yes, the slides might be a little bit big and a little bit rough, but this is a phase that you have to go through so you understand exactly where the limit of your car is. And finally, stage 4 is actually bringing your driving back a little bit, being more smooth with your inputs, having more gentle and progressive slides with only a little bit of opposite lock as you're going in, or a tiny little bit of understeer as you're coming through the corner. Now, this is where a driver becomes very quick, is when they're having the car right at the limit and they've pushed that limit of grip a little bit higher and everything is much more refined, and this is the phase that you need to be in if you want to win races. So as I've touched upon a little bit already in this tutorial, the limit or the grip threshold where we're actually beginning to make the car slide is a variable. Just because the car is sliding at points throughout the corner doesn't mean that you're traveling through the corner as quick as that car can possibly go. You can actually change your technique so that you travel through the corner a little bit quicker. I've coached clients before where they've had the car sliding around a little bit too much, a little bit with spiky inputs, and they've still been 3 seconds off the pace. So at this point we try and refine all of the driver's inputs, refine the rotation of the car, and then they'll go that little bit quicker. So the idea is to move this grip threshold, move the limit of the car as far away from where you are as possible so that we can carry as much speed into and through the corner as we possibly can. Now, for more information about this, if you go a few tutorials back, we have 4 tutorials on maximizing the braking phase, the entry phase, mid-corner and exit phases of the corners. So take a look at those, and it really looks in detail at how you can optimize each phase of the corner so that you have the correct technique and you can carry the maximum speed through the corner. Now, it's also very important when we're talking about driving on the limit that you manage your mistakes well. And as I've already mentioned, a mistake isn't massively running past the corner. It's maybe if you brake a little bit too early, or even carry 1 or 2 miles an hour too much speed into the corner, then it's how you manage this. Because yes, if you carry a little bit too much speed into the corner, you'll win a little bit on the way in, but you'll also lose a little bit on the way out of the corner. And it's this refinement and making the most out of each and every mistake that you make, or the variable speed that you may carry into the corner. Now, we're not talking about masses of different speeds. We're not talking 10 miles an hour extra into the corner. We're talking tiny amounts, but it's how you manage these mistakes and make the most out of them. And we're going to talk about this in more detail in a later tutorial. So how do we continually drive at the limit? First of all, how do we find the limit? And then how do we refine our driving so that we're driving the car at the limit through each and every phase of the corner? Well, the first thing to say is that you need to get the basics right first. Don't try and push yourself too soon so that you have the car sliding around before the fundamental techniques are in place. This is the quickest way that you'll have an accident when driving on track. So as I mentioned, get the basics right. First of all, make sure that your vision is a long way ahead of yourself and nice and broad. And we have a tutorial explaining exactly how to learn to have good vision. The next thing is make sure that you know the circuit very well and that your racing lines are consistent for a good number of laps. If your racing lines are inconsistent, then it's very difficult to push the car to the limit and break traction successfully, because if the racing line isn't consistent, then the speed that you carry into the corner and the amount the car slides will be variable. So make sure that you get this right before you start pushing the limit of the car. The next thing is to make sure that you have smooth inputs. Any sharp inputs or harsh inputs will cause the car to slide prematurely, and if you have a sharp input, it means that the slide will actually break away more quickly and won't be so progressive. So the smoother that the input is, the smoother that the slide will be, meaning that it won't take you by surprise, and actually it's much easier to catch the slide or the understeer when it happens. Finally, make sure that you have some capacity, mental capacity remaining. If all of your brain power is taken up by thinking about vision and racing lines and so on, then you won't actually have any extra capacity to think about pushing yourself through each phase of the corner and maximizing the speed through there. So all of these techniques that I've mentioned need to happen subconsciously without you thinking before you then push yourself to finding the limit and the ultimate grip threshold for your car. So, how to find the limit of your car and your driving? Well, the first thing I'm going to say is to gently increase your pace. We don't want to be taking big chunks extra speed into the corner and through the corner. If you do this, then there's a good chance that you'll overshoot by a big amount and you actually might not make it through the corner because you'll be asking the car to do too much work. Eventually, if you build up gently and gradually, then the car will eventually slide. Now, when the car slides, you need to think about which phase of the corner the car begins to slide, whether it's braking, turning, mid-corner, or the exit phase, and also think about which end of the car is limiting you, which end of the car is sliding first, whether you have understeer or whether you have oversteer. Now, as I mentioned before, you need to then think about how you maximize each 4 phases of the corner. It's all good and well braking into the corner and using 100% of the grip available, but then if you're not carrying the ultimate speed through the entry and the mid-corner phase, then you'll be losing lap time. So think about how you can maximize all of the corner, not just certain sections. This is the analysis phase where you're thinking about what you need to do, and then the next phase is to try and put that into action. So think about where you're losing time or where the car isn't sliding. If the car isn't sliding at any particular point in the corner, then you can think that you can carry more speed through that section of the corner. And you can do this on the next laps as soon as that, if you have the capacity to think about it. But what's more common is that you'll do it in the next section. So when you get out the car, have a think, have a little debrief with yourself and think where you can actually maximize and optimize the corner a little bit more. And then in the next session, try and put that into practice. Then it's a case of repeating this process so you get more and more refined and your inputs get smoother and smoother and the slides get more and more progressive and you're just on the limit of grip at all points through the corner. So when we're trying to find the limit, it's important that we find the limit of the car, of the grip threshold, as soon as we possibly can when we're going out on the circuit. I've seen many drivers who waste a good 5, 6, 10 laps driving way below the limit, and it just takes them way too long to get up to speed. I've worked on this quite a lot with one of my clients recently, and the advantage that he has in qualifying and at the beginning of a race, because he has this information about where the grip threshold is and where the limit actually is amazing. He makes so much time up at the beginning of a race. So one thing to bear in mind is that the grip levels on the circuit are always changing. Yes, throughout the day when you're testing, and also month by month whenever you may visit a circuit. So the things that change are the track and air temperature, which can affect the amount of grip that the circuit gives to you, the wind and the weather. Obviously, if it's windy and you have an aero car, it's going to affect how much grip you have in those higher speed corners. And obviously the weather, if it's raining, we're going to have less grip. I just worked with a driver who had very difficult conditions, obviously in the UK, and qualifying was just drying up. It had rained about half an hour before and the circuit was drying up. Now, in these conditions, it's really important to get some information about the grip levels on the circuit as soon as we possibly can, so that we can get a good lap in and drive at the limit all the way through the session. The next thing is the circuit condition. As a circuit evolves over a race weekend or month to month, there'll be different amounts and different types of rubber going into the circuit, and this can work with your tyres in a positive or a negative way. So the grip levels again will be changing. Obviously, through a race weekend, cars might be dropping oil or fuel, and this will also affect the grip levels coming from the circuit. The other thing that will change as you're going through a test day or a race weekend is the condition of your tyres. Obviously, this can change quite significantly and could add up to a couple or 3 seconds worth of lap time per lap. Now, the best way to find the ultimate grip level when you're driving on the circuit is to get as much data from your driving as possible. Now, to do this, you actually have to drive slightly over the grip threshold. You have to go beyond the limit. If you don't go beyond the limit, if you're driving under the grip threshold, then you're not getting any information back from the circuit. You actually have to make the car slide so that you know where the limit of grip is, so that you then get the information back. Now, it's really important when you're racing to do this as efficiently as possible. Every opportunity that you have when you go out, whether it be the first laps of qualifying or the green flag lap before a race, you should be trying to make the car work, trying to just break the limit, just break the grip threshold, so you get this information back, and then you can extrapolate this grip level over the rest of the circuit. It means that the first few laps of your qualifying session or your race will be very quick because you already understand the grip levels that are out there on the circuit. So how do we find these data points? How do we make the car slide in a safe way if it's on the green flag lap? Because obviously we don't want to push too hard, we can't go at maximum speed, and we want to be safe so that we don't have a spin or anything just before the race. Well, the first thing that I like to do to get some information back is to induce some understeer. Now, it's best to do this in a long corner where the car's loaded up for a long time. In a long corner, you have lots of opportunity to load the car up laterally for a long time, and it makes it easier to get some information out of the car and out of the circuit. So what I do is, when I'm coming up to a long corner, such as Luffield at Silverstone, it's a long second or third gear hairpin. What I like to do is to go in there at maybe 95% of what I expect the ultimate speed to be. I'll come off the brakes quite early, so we allow the front of the car to come up, and this will help us get understeer rather than oversteer. I'll then turn the car in nice and gently, not too hard because we don't want the car to oversteer, we want the car to understeer, which is nice and safe. I'll turn the car in, and if it doesn't slide straight away, I'll gently get back on the accelerator and gently increase the minimum corner speed until the car begins to understeer. When the car begins to understeer, I know that this is around the point at which, the maximum limit for the corner. I'm understanding how much grip is coming from the track. Obviously, if we change our technique slightly, so we don't have the understeer and the car is more well balanced, then we'll get a tiny little bit more grip from the circuit. The next thing I like to do, which is especially effective in the rain, is to increase brake pressure until one of the tyres locks up. Now, I always do this when I get in a new car. When it's safe to do so, I'll brake particularly early for a corner when there's no one behind me and ramp up the brake pressure until the wheels start to lock. This way I instantly know how quickly the car will decelerate. I can then extrapolate this information around the rest of the circuit, and I very efficiently understand the braking zones for this particular car. Now, as I mentioned, it's particularly interesting to use this technique in the rain because, as we're going to talk about in a later tutorial, there's a big difference in grip between being on the normal racing line, on all the rubber that's been laid down, and being off it in the rain. Now, usually we drive off the rubber in the rain because actually the circuit gives you much more grip when you're not on the rubber. A really good way to test this in the wet is to do one lap where you're braking on the rubber, and we start this lock-up procedure, and then the next lap move off the rubber, brake in the same place and brake until we lock up. And most times you'll find that there's much more grip when we're driving off the racing line. Finally, we can use the accelerator to see how much grip is available in all the traction zones. Now, the important thing is that when you begin to accelerate, we're already somewhere close to the limit. If you're too far away from the limit, it means that you have to really stamp on the accelerator to get the car to slide, to get the car to wheel spin. And this isn't what we want. We want to be between 90 and 95% usage of the grip that's available. Then we can gently bring the throttle in, see where the rear of the car begins to slide, and get some good information back about how much grip the circuit is giving us. So that's all for today's tutorial. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please share with your social media, and I'll see you next time.